example 8 says express each of the following in terms of the same trigonometric function of an acute angle. So we have the sine of 1001 degrees. Yay. So we need sine, and we need an acute angle, so an angle between 0 degrees and 90 degrees. So we have to start by trying to convert this back to the unit circle. So we need to get this angle inside of the unit circle to do anything with it. Okay, so if we think of 1001 degrees, we need to take off 360s. So if we take off 360 degrees once, that's going to give us, let's see, 641 degrees? That's not good enough. So we take off another 360 degrees. And so that's going to give us 281 degrees. Cool. So we're at 281. So that's where we're going to start here. So we know that the sine of 1001 degrees is the same thing as the sine of 281 degrees. We know that that's true. Well, the sine of 281 degrees is not acute. So we have to convert that. Well, one thing that I know from working the problems before, and again pointing this out, that if I'm looking for an acute angle, that's going to have the opposite sign as if I did 360 minus that angle. So since I know that the sine of 360 minus an angle is the same thing as the opposite of the sine of some angle. So the sine of 281 degrees, that would be, what, 79, negative sine of 79. Wow. So we were able to go all the way back and figure out, the sine of 1001 degrees. Well, that's going to be the same as the sine of 281. We just went back 2 cycles. It's the same spot. But again, we didn't land with an acute part, so we had to somehow convert it back using what we learned throughout this section and the logic of the unit circle, that, hey, this is going to have the opposite answer as this. Now, the secant of 23 pi over 8. This is interesting. So the secant of 23 pi over 8. Okay, so how do we do this with radians? We have to subtract 2 pi radians to get back inside of a regular circle. In regular unit circle, that can be kind of difficult. So we start with our 23 pi over 8. And we have to subtract 2 pi from this. Now, you may say, how do I do that? They're not set up the same. Well, 2 pi can be written in a bunch of different ways. So you don't have to write this down, but 2 pi can be written as, 4 pi over 2, or 6 pi over 3, or 8 pi over 4, or 10 pi over 5. Whatever it is, look at this number. 4 over 2, 6 over 3, 8 over 4, 10 over 5. You're just tacking the pi on. It's like a placeholder. So don't get too caught up with the pi part. Think of the number more, and think of the number in relation to 2. So since we're talking about groups of 8, taking 2 pi away would be 16 pi. Now that's going to give me 7 pi over 8, which is certainly going to be between 0 and 0 and pi over 2. That's what we want. Now, this angle, however, is bigger than pi over 2. 7/8 is larger than 1/2. So, again, try to disregard the pi. Just think of it as that's a placeholder in radian measure. So what I need to do is figure out what kind of logic am I going to use to get back to that point. So if I have an angle that I'm looking for, now 7 pi over 8, that's before pi. So that would be this way. So what do I know about the secants of these things? Well, what is secant? Secant of theta is the same thing as 1 over the cosine. Okay? So what about the cosines of these two things? Do I know? Well, the cosines are opposite because they have opposite x values. So I'm going to go and be able to say that, hey, the sine, secant. Secant of 100, we're in radians, so the secant of pi minus theta is the opposite of the secant of theta. Now, these work the same way as the sine, cosine, tangent work because sine, cosine, these are based off of those. They're going to have the same value. So what I'm looking for is, so the secant of 7 pi over 8, what would that mean about theta? Well, pi minus what equals 7 pi over 8. Okay, so think of it as 1 minus what makes 7/8. The answer to this is going to be 1/8. So this would be negative secant of pi over 8. So thinking in terms of fractions can be difficult, but we want to slow ourselves down. Think about them as groups. Think about the numerator as being like kind of items of a group. 7 out of 8. That's our ratio of our whole unit. So if we have one whole thing and we take 7 out of 8 away from it, we have 1/8 left. And we, of course, just call that pi over 8.